He thought he knew every secret she ever had.
Until one hidden message from her past was meant only for him.
One late night changed everything. Full story drops now. Watch if you dare.
There are moments in life that split everything into before and after. For Daniel Hayes, a single father of one, that moment arrived on a rainy Thursday evening, when the world outside his window was gray and the only sound in his apartment was the gentle hum of the dishwasher. Daniel was not a man who believed in fate or signs. He believed in routines and the comfort of the familiar, in the small rituals that made up his days, packing his daughter's lunch, double-checking her homework, making sure the bills were paid on time. Life for Daniel was a series of checklists, and he liked it that way. After his marriage ended 3 years ago, he built a new life for himself and his daughter, Emma. Brick by careful brick. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe, predictable, or so he thought. That night, Daniel was cleaning out a box of old photos he'd found in the back of his closet. The box was battered, the corners frayed, and the lid barely held together by a strip of yellowing tape. He meant to sort through it for months, but there was always something more urgent: laundry, groceries, work emails. But tonight, with Emma at her friend's house for a sleepover and the apartment unusually quiet, he finally had the time. He set the box on the coffee table, poured himself a cup of coffee, and began to sift through the memories. The photos were a time capsule of another life. There were pictures from his college days, all wild hair and hopeful grins. Photos from his wedding, where he and his ex-wife, Julia, looked impossibly young and impossibly happy. Pictures of Emma as a baby, her tiny fist curled around his finger, her eyes wide with wonder. Daniel smiled at those, feeling a pang of nostalgia mixed with something sharper, a longing for a time when everything seemed possible. He was halfway through the box when he found a stack of envelopes, each one labeled in Julia's neat handwriting. Summer 2012, Emma's first birthday, anniversary trip. Daniel hesitated, then opened the envelope marked anniversary trip. The photos inside were from a weekend in the mountains, just the two of them before Emma was born. He remembered that trip, the way the air smelled of pine, the way Julia laughed when he tried to cook over the campfire, the way they talked late into the night about their dreams for the future. As he flipped through the photos, something caught his eye. In one of the pictures, Julia was standing in front of a wooden sign, smiling at the camera. But it wasn't her smile that drew his attention. It was the sign behind her. At first, it looked like any other trail marker, but as Daniel squinted, he realized there was something written on it in black marker, just below the official lettering. He leaned closer, his heart beating a little faster. The words were faint, but he could just make them out. If you find this, look in the blue book. Daniel frowned. He didn't remember seeing anything unusual on that trip, and he certainly didn't remember a blue book. He set the photo aside, curiosity prickling at the edges of his mind. He picked up another photo from the same envelope. This one showed Julia sitting on a picnic blanket, her head thrown back in laughter. In the corner of the blanket, barely visible, was a small blue notebook. He stared at the image, his mind racing. Was it a coincidence? Or had Julia left some kind of message, hidden in plain sight all these years? Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the next envelope, labeled Emma's first birthday. He flipped through the photos quickly, searching for any sign of the blue book. There it was again, on the edge of the kitchen counter, next to the birthday cake. In another photo, Julia was writing in it, her face serious, her pen poised above the page. A chill ran down Daniel's spine. He never noticed the notebook before, never thought to ask about it. He tried to remember if he'd ever seen it around the house, but nothing came to mind. It was as if the blue book had existed only in these photos, a silent witness to moments he thought he understood. He sat back on the couch, the photos spread out before him like pieces of a puzzle. What was Julia trying to say? Why hide a message in their old photos? And why now? After all these years, was he only just noticing it? Daniel's mind flashed back to the last conversation he had with Julia before she moved out. It had been tense, full of words left unsaid. She'd looked at him with a mixture of sadness and something else. Regret, maybe, or hope. "You'll figure it out one day," she'd said, her voice barely above a whisper. At the time, he'd thought she was talking about their marriage, about the reasons it had fallen apart. But now, with the photos spread out before him and the mystery of the blue book gnawing at his thoughts, he wondered if she'd meant something more. He gathered the photos, stacking them carefully, and set them aside. He needed to find that blue book. If it still existed, it would be somewhere in the apartment, buried in a box or tucked away on a forgotten shelf. Daniel stood up, his heart pounding, and began a search. He started in the living room, checking the bookshelves, the drawers, the storage bins under the couch. Nothing. He moved to the bedroom, pulling boxes from the closet, rifling through old journals and notebooks. Still nothing. The kitchen yielded no clues, nor did the bathroom or the hallway closet. By the time he reached Emma's room, he was starting to feel foolish. Maybe he was chasing shadows, seeing patterns where none existed. But then, as he was about to give up, he noticed a small box on the top shelf of Emma's closet. It was covered in dust, the lid askew. Daniel pulled it down, coughing as a cloud of dust rose into the air. Inside, beneath a pile of Emma's old baby clothes, was a small blue notebook. He stared at it, hardly daring to believe it was real. The cover was worn, the edges frayed, but it was unmistakably the same notebook from the photos. Daniel's hands shook as he opened it, the pages crackling with age. Inside, in Julia's familiar handwriting, was a single line for Daniel. "If you're reading this, you're ready." Daniel sat on the edge of Emma's bed, the blue notebook heavy in his hands. The room was filled with the soft glow of her nightlight, casting gentle shadows on the walls. He could hear the rain tapping against the window, a steady rhythm that seemed to echo the pounding of his heart. For a long moment, he just stared at the first page, the words for Daniel. "If you're reading this, you're ready," looping in his mind. Ready for what? He wondered. Ready to face the past? Ready to understand something he'd missed? Or maybe, ready to forgive, not just Julia, but himself. He turned the page, his breath catching as he saw Julia's handwriting fill the next sheet. The first entry was dated the day after their anniversary trip, nearly a decade ago. "I don't know if you'll ever find this," she'd written, "but I need to put these words somewhere. Maybe one day, you'll understand me better than I ever understood myself." Daniel's eyes stung as he read. The entries were raw, honest, and sometimes painful. Julia wrote about her fears, about becoming a mother, about losing herself in the routines of marriage, about the pressure to be perfect. She wrote about her love for Daniel, how it had changed over the years, deepening in some ways and fraying in others. She wrote about Emma, about the overwhelming joy and terror of holding their daughter for the first time, about the sleepless nights and the small, perfect moments that made it all worthwhile. But there was more. Julia wrote about the cracks that had formed between them, the arguments that started small and grew into chasms, the silences that stretched for days. She wrote about feeling invisible, about longing for Daniel to see her, not just as a wife or a mother, but as herself. "I know you love me," she wrote in one entry, "but sometimes I feel like you love the idea of me more than the real me. I wish I could tell you this, but I'm afraid it would break us." Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. He remembered those years, the way he'd thrown himself into work, the way he'd tried to fix things with grand gestures instead of quiet understanding. He'd thought he was doing everything right, but reading Julia's words, he realized how much he'd missed, how much he'd failed to notice. He turned the pages slowly, each entry a window into Julia's heart. Some were filled with hope, plans for the future, dreams for Emma. memories of laughter and love. Others were darker, tinged with regret and sadness. I'm scared we're losing each other, she wrote in one. I don't know how to reach you anymore. As Daniel read, he felt the weight of the years settle on his shoulders. He thought about the day Julia left, the way she'd packed her things in silence, the way Emma had clung to her leg, not understanding why her world was changing. He'd been angry then, angry at Julia, at himself, at the universe for taking away the life he'd worked so hard to build. But now, reading her words, he felt something different. Not anger, but sorrow. And beneath that, a flicker of understanding. Halfway through the notebook, Daniel found a page that stopped him cold. It was dated a few weeks before Julia moved out. If you're reading this, Daniel, I want you to know I never stopped loving you. I just stopped knowing how to be your wife. I hope one day you'll forgive me. I hope you'll forgive yourself, too. He closed his eyes, the words washing over him. Forgiveness. It was something he'd struggled with for years, something he'd buried beneath layers of routine and responsibility. He told himself he was over Julia, that he'd moved on. But the truth was, he'd never really let go. He'd carried the hurt with him, letting it shape his life in ways he barely understood. He turned the page and found something unexpected. Tucked between the lines of Julia's handwriting was a small, folded piece of paper. Daniel unfolded it carefully, his hands trembling. Inside was a photograph, one he'd never seen before. It was a picture of Julia and Emma, taken in the park near their old house. Julia was holding Emma on her lap, both of them laughing, their faces lit by the afternoon sun. On the back, Julia had written, "The best of us." Daniel stared at the photo, tears blurring his vision. He thought about all the times he'd focused on what he'd lost, on the ways his life had fallen short of his dreams. But looking at the picture, he realized there was something he'd overlooked, the love that had existed, the moments of joy that had been real, even if they hadn't lasted. He placed the photo back in the notebook and closed it gently. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace. The past was still there with all its pain and regret, but it didn't feel as heavy. He understood now that Julia hadn't left him out of malice or indifference. She'd left because she needed to find herself, because she needed something he couldn't give. And maybe, just maybe, that was okay. Daniel stood up, the blue notebook pressed to his chest. He walked to the living room and sat down on the couch, the photos from the box still scattered across the table. He picked up the picture of Julia in front of the trail sign, the one that had started it all. He smiled, a bittersweet smile, and whispered, "Thank you." The rain had stopped. Outside, the world was quiet, washed clean. Daniel felt something inside him shift, a letting go, a new beginning. He knew there would still be hard days, still be moments when the past threatened to pull him under. But he also knew he was ready to move forward, to build a new life for himself and Emma, one rooted not in regret, but in hope. The next morning, Daniel woke to the sound of Emma's laughter drifting down the hallway. She was back from her sleepover, already chattering away on a video call with her best friend. For a moment, Daniel lay in bed, the blue notebook resting on his nightstand, and let the warmth of her voice fill the room. The heaviness from the night before had faded, replaced by a quiet clarity. He knew what he needed to do. After breakfast, Daniel found Emma in the living room, sprawled on the rug with her colored pencils and a half-finished drawing of their cat, Whiskers. She looked up as he entered, her eyes bright. "Daddy, can we go to the park today? It's not raining anymore." He smiled, ruffling her hair. "Of course, kiddo. Let's make a day of it." He hesitated, then added, "But first, I want to show you something." Emma watched curiously as Daniel retrieved the blue notebook from his room. He sat beside her, the notebook in his lap, and took a deep breath. "This belonged to your mom," he said gently. "I found it last night, hidden in some old photos. She wrote a lot of things in here, about us, about you, about how much she loved our family." Emma's face softened. She missed her mother, though she rarely said it out loud. Daniel opened the notebook to the photograph Julia had tucked inside. the one of her and Emma in the park. He handed it to his daughter. She called this the best of us. Emma traced her finger over the image, her lips pressed together. I remember that day. She whispered. We fed the ducks, and Mom let me eat ice cream before lunch. Daniel nodded, his throat tight. She wanted us to remember the good times. Even when things got hard, she never stopped loving you, or me. They sat together in silence, the weight of the past settling between them, not as a burden, but as a bridge. Daniel realized that sharing Julia's words with Emma was the first step in healing, not just for himself, but for his daughter, too. After a while, Emma closed the notebook and looked up at her father. Can we bring this to the park? I want to show Mom's picture to the ducks. Daniel laughed. The sound light and genuine. Absolutely. I think she'd like that. The park was alive with the energy of a new day. Children raced across the grass. Parents chatted on benches, and the pond sparkled in the sunlight. Daniel and Emma found a quiet spot. Beneath a willow tree, spreading out their picnic blanket, Emma set the blue notebook beside her, occasionally glancing at the photo as she munched on her sandwich. As Emma played, Daniel watched her with a sense of awe. She was resilient, open-hearted, and endlessly curious. He thought about Julia's words in the notebook, her fears, her hopes, her regrets. He realized that for all their mistakes, they had given Emma the gift of love, even if it hadn't always looked perfect. A little while later, Emma returned, her cheeks flushed from running. She plopped down next to Daniel and leaned against his shoulder. Daddy, do you think Mom can see us? Daniel considered the question, searching for the right words. I think she's always with us, in the memories we share and the love we carry. And I think she'd be proud of you, of both of us. Emma smiled, her eyes shining. I hope so. They spent the afternoon feeding ducks, drawing pictures, and reading from the blue notebook. Daniel read some of Julia's lighter entries aloud, funny stories about Emma as a toddler, silly things they'd done as a family. Emma giggled, asking questions and adding her own memories. The pain of loss was still there, but it was softened by laughter and connection. As the sun began to set, Daniel packed up their things. He slipped the blue notebook into his backpack, feeling its weight, a reminder of the past, but also a symbol of hope. He knew there would be more hard days ahead, more questions from Emma, more moments when the ache of absence would return. But he also knew they would face them together, with honesty and love. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, the blue notebook open before him. He turned to the last page, where Julia had written a final message. If you're reading this, Daniel, it means you found the courage to look back. Now find the courage to move forward. Love is never wasted. It changes us, even when it ends. Daniel closed the notebook, his heart full. He realized that the hidden message Julia had left wasn't just in the photos or the words on the page. It was in the life they'd built, the daughter they'd raised, the lessons they'd learned. It was in the act of letting go, and in the choice to keep loving, even after loss. He stood, walked to Emma's room, and watched her sleep for a moment. She was the best of both of them, Julia's spirit, his steadiness, their shared laughter. Daniel knew he couldn't change the past, but he could shape the future. And that, he decided, was enough. The days that followed felt different, as if a veil had lifted from Daniel's life. He moved through his routines with a new sense of purpose, no longer haunted by the shadows of what might have been. The blue notebook found a permanent place on the living room shelf, nestled between Emma's favorite storybooks and a framed photo of the three of them from years ago. Sometimes, Daniel would catch Emma flipping through its pages, her lips moving as she read her mother's words, and he'd feel a quiet gratitude for the gift Julia had left them, a bridge across time, a way to heal. One Saturday morning, as autumn leaves drifted past the window, Daniel decided it was time to do something he'd been putting off for too long. He gathered the old box of photos, the one that had started it all, and sat down with Emma at the kitchen table. Together, they sorted through the images, laughing at Daniel's wild college hair and Emma's baby antics, pausing to remember the moments that mattered most. For every photo, Daniel told Emma a story about the day she took her first steps, about the camping trip where Julia burned the marshmallows, about the time they all got caught in a summer rainstorm and danced in the puddles. As they worked, Daniel noticed how Emma's questions had changed. She no longer asked why her mother had left, or if she'd ever come back. Instead, she wanted to know what Julia was like as a friend, what made her laugh, what dreams she'd had for the future. Daniel answered honestly, sharing not just the good memories, but the hard ones too. He talked about the arguments, the misunderstandings, the ways they both tried and failed and tried again. He wanted Emma to know that love wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. When they finished, Emma carefully placed the blue notebook on top of the photo box. "We should keep these together," she said. "So we don't forget." Daniel nodded, his eyes misty. "That's a good idea, kiddo. Memories are important. They remind us where we've been and how far we've come." That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Daniel sat alone in the quiet apartment. He thought about the journey he'd taken, the pain of loss, the weight of regret, the slow, steady work of healing. He realized that the hidden message Julia had left wasn't just for him. It was for Emma, too. It was a reminder that even when love changes shape, even when people leave, the best parts of them remain. In laughter, in stories, and the courage to keep moving forward. Daniel picked up his phone and dialed the number he hadn't called in months. When his friend Mark answered, Daniel smiled. "Hey, man, you up for a hike this weekend? Emma wants to try that old trail again." Mark laughed. "You mean the one where you got us lost for 2 hours?" Daniel grinned. "That's the one. But this time, I think I'll let Emma lead the way." As he hung up, Daniel felt a sense of lightness he hadn't known in years. He understood now that life was full of hidden messages, some written in ink, some in the choices we make, some in the love we leave behind. The past would always be a part of him, but it didn't have to define him. He could choose what to carry forward, what to let go, and what to cherish. And as the first stars appeared outside his window, Daniel knew that he and Emma would be okay. They had each other, they had their memories, and they had the courage to keep going. The story wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. As autumn deepened, Daniel and Emma found themselves returning to the park more often, drawn by the golden leaves and the gentle hush of the season. One crisp afternoon, as Emma raced ahead to the swings, Daniel noticed a woman sitting on a nearby bench, reading a book. She looked up and smiled a warm, familiar smile that made something in Daniel's chest flutter. Her name was Claire, and she was new to the neighborhood. A teacher with a gentle laugh and a love for old novels. Their first conversation was easy, filled with stories about Emma's adventures and Claire's favorite childhood books. Over the weeks, their paths crossed again and again at the park, at the local coffee shop, at the Saturday farmers market. Each meeting felt like a new page in a story Daniel hadn't dared to hope for. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Daniel found the courage to ask Claire to join him and Emma for dinner. She accepted, her eyes shining, as they walked home together. Daniel realized that love could return in unexpected ways, softly, patiently, like the turning of the seasons. And as Emma skipped ahead, Daniel reached for Claire's hand, ready to begin a new chapter.